My colleague in London and a lifetime member of this church, the Reverend Dr. David Usher, has taken a very principled step. Back in 2005, he declared to other ministers at a district meeting in London that he would no longer be conducting weddings until the government of the United Kingdom amended the Marriage Act to include all couples, whatever their sexual orientation. His congregation stood to lose quite a lot from this stance. His church was a chocolate box English country church, village church, and it was a very popular one amongst brides in that area. And the photographs from the weddings he conducted often appeared in the local Country Life magazine, and so it was great publicity for his church. I never did find out how supportive or not his congregation were, but to David it was irrelevant. And as far as I can ascertain, he hasn't performed a wedding in 4 years. And he tells me his batting average has got better on Saturday afternoons, so that may suggest that he's still not doing any weddings. There are many objections made to the broadening out of marriage to include gay and lesbian couples. They seem to coalesce around a central theme. That theme is that should gay and lesbian people be allowed to marry like the rest of us, then the institution of marriage will be watered down somewhat. Its role as a protector and promoter of long-term and committed love will be under threat. The unchanged eternal nature of marriage will be in jeopardy, they seem to be saying. Yet marriage has been in a state of flux since the dawn of time, and the origins of marriage were never about love. Stephanie Coontz is a professor of history and family studies, and in her book, Marriage, a History, From Obedience to Intimacy, or How Love Conquered Marriage, she looks at the history of marriage. Through most of Western civilization, marriage has been more a matter of money, power, and survival than of delicate sentiments. In medieval Europe, everyone from the lord of the manor to the village locals had a say in deciding who should wed. Love was considered an absurdly flimsy reason for a match. And even during the Enlightenment and Victorian eras, adultery and friendship were often more passionate than marriage. In ancient Greece, marriage inheritance was more important than feelings. A woman whose father had died without male heirs could be forced to marry her nearest male relative, even if she had to divorce her own husband first. In 12th century Europe, marriage was good for loving someone else. Upper-class marriages were often arranged before the couple met. Aristocrats believed love was incompatible with marriage and could only flourish in adultery. In 14th century Europe, even ordinary people couldn't choose whom to marry. The lord of one Black Forest manor decrees in 1344 that all his unmarried tenants, including widows and widowers, marry spouses of his choosing. Elsewhere, peasants wishing to pick a partner must pay a fee. And in the mid-19th century, we start to see love gain some currency, but there's still a lot of room for adultery as well. In the mid-19th century in the United States, the honeymoon replaces the older custom of bridal tours, in which the newly married couple travel after the wedding to visit friends and family who could not attend the ceremony. Even so, in the new honeymoon arrangement, many brides usually would bring their girlfriends along with them. And then in the 20th century through to today, we began to worship the couple. Intimacy shrinks to encompass just two, and love becomes the only reason for marriage. Marriage has always been in a state of flux. Its changes have always reflected rather than driven the changes of society at large. For heterosexual couples, the opening up of the Marriage Act to include some same-sex couples will not water down or threaten the validity of your marriage in any way. How good, bad, or indifferent your marriage will be due to many factors. You, your partner, your changing circumstances, your family history, life's slings and arrows, luck or lack of it. But the one thing that will not affect it will be the fact that couples of the same sex were married under the same Marriage Act as you were. It just won't. I see absolutely no reason why we all shouldn't get married under the same Marriage Act. Marriage has had a long and interesting history. It started out to be all about property and money, then it became to be about the procreation of children. Then it was about the love and commitment between a man and a woman, and sometimes, but not always, the nurturing of children. Children born of the union, adopted children, foster children, and stepchildren. Maybe now it can be about the love and commitment of a man or a woman and a woman, with the nurturing or not of children, by birth, adoption, or otherwise. Let this all be done using the same piece of paper. And ministers and celebrants who don't have to feel dreadful when they read out the extracts of their country's Marriage Act, who don't feel at the end of what is a wonderful day that they have yet again helped to perpetuate an unfair and offensive system of marriage. As the sociologist E. Graff says in her book, What is Marriage For? Society need not reinvent the wheel, or in this case a parallel institution that attempts to replicate years of accreted decisions about what's fair, simply to keep the word marriage pure from the taint of homosexuality. It need only ask itself, what is marriage for? If it's to let equal partners willingly share responsibility for each other's lives and fortunes, then same-sex couples belong within it. I was asked last year to write part of the eulogy for the funeral of the church vice president of the Richmond Unitarian Church, the place I ministered before I came here. Her name was Christine, and I loved her a lot. When I first met her, I was terrified of her. Then I admired her, and then I grew to love her. She was very stern but kind, fiercely intelligent and deeply committed to reason. When I performed that same-sex blessing ceremony I spoke about earlier, I asked if Christine would work as a warden on that day, meeting and greeting the guests. She did. A few weeks later, when I went to her house to do some administration work, she said, "You know, 10 years ago when we worked on that decision of whether or not we would allow same-sex blessings to take place in the church, I was against it, dead against it. I don't know why, but it was a majority vote, so I promised I would always help and never obstruct work in this area. Of course, 10 years went by and we never had a request for a same-sex blessing. And then last week you officiated at one. And it was fine. It was wonderful. It was really moving. I suppose I've moved on a bit since then. I guess I was young and silly," she said, and she would have been 65. And she laughed and then said briskly, "Anyway, I've changed my mind, and that's that. I would never ask or tell any of you to change your mind. That's not my job. But I would hope that you would seriously think about how you feel about this issue and use reason, if nothing else, to guide you. Because in the end, allowing same-sex couples to marry would not directly impact upon anyone else's daily commitments, not a whit. Certainly no more than heterosexual marriages do. But legally recognising the marriages of same-sex couples would be another important step toward the building of a world where the inherent worth and dignity of each individual is respected and there is justice for all. We should not settle for anything less." I would like to close with those words I opened with by the Iranian Sufi mystic Hafiz. "It happens all the time in heaven, and someday it will begin to happen on earth. That men and women who are married, and men who are lovers, and women who give each other light, often will get down on their knees, and while so tenderly holding their lover's hand, with tears in their eyes, will sincerely speak, saying, 'My dear, how can I be more loving to you? How can I be more kind?' Amen."